Of all the ways my life could have gotten turned upside down, I never imagined it'd be by a 60-something woman in floral perfume and a stack of HOA paperwork. But you know what they say, never underestimate a bored neighbor with too much time and not enough boundaries. It all started the morning the county fraud investigator came knocking, his badge glinting and his voice as steady as a surgeon's hand. "Ma'am, we have the bank transfer receipts, the texts, and the security camera footage of you taking that envelope marked rent plus bond out of his mailbox." He was talking to Margaret Peton, our beloved HOA treasurer, who wore her lipstick bright as a stop sign and her attitude even brighter. Margaret just blinked, her mouth twitching as if she couldn't quite decide between outrage and denial, and managed to spit out, "That wasn't theft. That was simply oversight recovery for administrative costs." Yeah, that happened. But let me back up a sec and walk you through how we got to the moment Margaret's world started unraveling in front of half the county. My name's Daniel. I'm a disabled veteran, pretty handy with a wheelchair, and a firm believer in second chances, which is why I was so hopeful when I moved into that cozy little duplex in Maplewood Gardens, ramps out front, wide doorways, all the stuff you'd want if you, like me, rely on a service dog named Duke and some monthly care visits just to get by. The neighborhood was a tidy pocket of rental units managed by the HOA, and the woman pulling all the strings was none other than Margaret herself, interim treasurer, part-time floral judge, and, let's be honest, full-time guardian of community standards, at least in her own mind. From the jump, Margaret made it clear I didn't fit her vision of this perfect neighborhood. She'd stroll past my place every morning, clipboard in one hand, pen in the other, eyes narrowed on every infraction she could find. My ramp was 2 inches too close to the sidewalk. Duke's water bowl sat where passers-by could see it. My porch light was too bright or too dim, depending on her mood. I mean, you get the picture. But I tried to play by the rules, and when the time came to move in, I did exactly what the HOA required. Put my rent and bond, $2,900 total, in an envelope labeled with my name and unit, dropped it in the special HOA mailbox outside the community center. Just to cover my bases, I snapped a photo, time-stamped, 10:15 a.m., March 3rd. You don't last long in the Army without learning a thing or two about documentation. Not even an hour later, the envelope was gone, and the nightmare began. Margaret started spinning stories faster than a politician at election time. First, she swore she never saw a payment. When I showed her the photo, she said I used the wrong mailbox, her tone dripping with condescension. Next, she claimed my envelope got destroyed during mailroom pest control, which was news to everyone since there'd been no pest control in months. And then, like clockwork, the letters started piling up on my door. Delinquent rent, unpaid bond, threats of eviction. Each one hand-delivered by Margaret herself, who'd ring my doorbell until I showed up, then stand there lecturing me on responsibility while Duke, who knows a bad apple when he sees one, growled soft and low. Now, I kept my cool, took notes, asked for receipts, requested proof every step of the way. Margaret just delayed, dodged, or flat out ignored me for 2 weeks straight. Finally, she popped back up with a new claim. The HOA board never approved your lease anyway. You need to vacate within 30 days. She actually looked pleased, like she'd finally cornered me. But what Margaret didn't realize is I'd been quietly recording every conversation, every message, every letter. Army habit, you know? I was building a case, even if I didn't realize how big it would become. The twist? It all unraveled at the community wine and cheese stroll, a party I wasn't invited to but heard all about from my neighbor Robert. One of those guys who notices everything but minds his own business unless you ask. Well, apparently, after a few too many glasses of cheap wine, Margaret started bragging to board member Jennifer Hayes about the $2,900 gift she'd found in the vet's mailbox, laughing that guys like me don't read the fine print. What Margaret didn't know was Jennifer was still holding a grudge from last Thanksgiving, when Margaret disqualified her pie for having a store-bought crust. No such rule existed, but that didn't stop Margaret. Jennifer had her phone out, recording everything, and the next day she handed me the audio with a look that said, "Let's see her get out of this." Armed with the recording, my photos, texts, and every last threatening letter, I called legal aid, the county fraud office, and, just for good measure, a local news tip line. The story hit Maplewood Gardens like a hurricane. Suddenly, Neighbors who'd always kept their heads down came out of the woodwork, each with their own story of misplaced fees, lost deposits, or fines for the wrong shade of mulch. It was like someone flipped a switch. Turns out, I wasn't the only one. The official inquiry blew the doors wide open. Bank records, social media posts. Margaret really was that bold. Showed she'd cashed my payment through her HOA recovery fund account and booked herself a cruise to the Bahamas the next day, complete with Instagram shots of her living her best life. Forensic audits revealed she'd siphoned off nearly $40,000 over 3 years. Landscaping fees, security deposits, special assessments, all routed into her personal accounts. And the rest of the board? Most had looked the other way or figured their slice was safe. You should have seen the emergency HOA meeting. Margaret at the podium, clutching her clipboard like a life preserver, insisting these were all misunderstandings and that leadership sometimes means making unpopular decisions. Someone yelled back, "Yeah, stealing is always unpopular," and the room erupted. By the time the county investigators served her with fraud charges, after she'd tried, unsuccessfully, to barricade herself inside her house using garden gnomes, she looked like someone whose world had just caved in. The next morning, her mugshot was splashed on the front page of the local paper, lipstick perfect, hair wild, eyes wide with disbelief. The headline? HOA treasurer busted for pocketing disabled vet's rent. You'd think it might end there, but the courts worked fast. The prosecutor had every receipt, every message, even those texts where Margaret called the stolen rent a spiritual tax, owed to people like her for maintaining order. It was ugly. More neighbors came forward. The final tally, over $70,000 stolen from people who trusted her, some of them seniors, some with disabilities, a lot just trying to make it in a tough year. Margaret's defense? She tried to say she meant to use the money for community improvements, but nobody was buying it, not with all the evidence lined up like dominoes. The verdict came back in less than 2 hours. Guilty on 15 counts of felony theft, 8 of fraud, 3 of elder abuse, 2 of violating the Fair Housing Act. The judge sentenced her to 7 years, with no chance at early release for 3, and ordered her to pay back $112,000, including damages and interest, plus 5,000 hours of community service, all with disability advocacy groups. Lifetime ban from any board or fiduciary job. When they brought out the cuffs, Margaret went out shouting about how the community would fall apart without her, lipstick smeared, hair a mess, her garden gnome empire finished for good. Funny thing, though, the neighborhood didn't fall apart. For the first time in years, people started chatting on their porches again. Robert stopped by with fresh tomatoes. Jennifer organized a real block party, pies and all, and nobody cared where the crust came from. Duke and I sat outside most evenings, wheels up, watching kids ride their bikes where Margaret's rules used to say they couldn't. Life felt lighter, like a bad storm had finally blown through, leaving fresh air behind. But if you think this story is all about one bad apple, you're missing the bigger picture. These little kingdoms pop up everywhere. HOAs, workplaces, city halls, where people who crave control get too comfortable, and the ones they target stay silent because it's easier. That's how power sticks around, until somebody decides enough is enough and calls it out, receipts in hand. So let me throw this one to you. Have you ever seen someone abuse their position and get away with it? Or did you ever have to fight back, too? What do you think real justice looks like, especially when the rules seem stacked against the little guy? Drop your story below, or just weigh in on what you'd have done if you were in my wheels. Community's what we make it. Let's hear where you stand.